Well, good afternoon, folks. I guess not quite afternoon yet. Um, we're going to do a second turn on a burl bowl. First thing we're going to do is start off by grinding some, getting our tools sharp. Let's see where our platform's at. Don't know whether we'll need our scraper, but we probably will. I don't really have a real good way of setting that, so I just do it by eye. It's not really a very critical angle to start with. Just wanted to raise a nice burr, a nice gentle curve. That takes care of that one. We'll do our swept back bowl gouges. It's mainly what we'll be using today. This is the one that's getting worn out. It's getting a little harder to get it lined up where I want it. That's definitely different than what it was. There's kind of the problem when they start to get worn out there. Most of these jigs are made to the lower top of the flutes in order to get it straight. Once you're back beyond the flute, then it becomes a thing where you're eyeballing it really. So that means it's going to take longer, you're going to grind more material away, but in this case, I'm not worried about it. This is an old Sorby one. I just wanted to keep using it up to where I get down to just the round bar, which is about another 2 inches worth. And then I'm going to make it into a round bar skew when I get to that point. Because now when I put my normal one on, which is a Thompson, it'd be like 1 pass or 2 passes on each side. Nice and sharp and ready to go. Switch jigs, we'll do the sharpen the 40-degree gouge as well. I actually have a jig this is a Wolverine jig. It's set right for the 40 degrees. So it's very quick and easy to sharpen. And I do not do the 40-degree gouge by hand. This works for me. I don't need to be the one that says it has to be done by hand. It does have to have a very small cutting bevel though. That I do by hand. That does make it work better. And we got to do a spindle gouge. Which is also getting short too. But we do have a new one of them in the wings, so to speak. I'll change the jig a little bit. This one shouldn't take much either. I've been working with a bunch of Spectra ply wood, so That really is very abusive on, abrasive, I guess you'd say, abusive on cutting edge tools, because it's mainly glue. I should have done this one earlier. This would be the bottom, sort of the bottom bowl gouge. Not really a good idea to be doing this while the machine's running. It's slowing down, so. Looks like that's close enough. And that's it. We're all sharpened up, ready to make some chips fly. Looks like that camera needs a little cleaning. So we can go over the head. Nah, 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 nah. We did start early though. How are you today, Random? We're on vacation, so it's the only reason we're on at such an odd hour for me. I am on vacation this week, so you may see this more than one day this week, because I do have quite a bit of work to do down here. And the weekend was busy, so didn't do anything there. We'll see if we can get something out of this burl. This is actually an old piece, believe it or not. This is a piece of elm burl. Has quite a bit of burling up around the top, of course. It was rough turned 128 of 18. Gives you an idea how long some of this stuff sticks around. Not sure why I never finished it, but I didn't. So we're going to finish this up today. At least that's the plan. And also, when I turned it originally, sure I turned it on the VM100 because of the size of the tenon that's on it. So we'll try and get it back in centered up so that we can put a new tenon on and retrue the outside. This thing was turned wet, but it really hasn't moved a ton. It probably really doesn't matter. This tenon here is going to go away. I'll put a new one on for the size of the chuck. And I should have set the calipers for that because I don't, getting ahead of myself. I think I know what the dimension is, but we'll do it the right way. Show you how I set things. Looks like we were doing some super glue work on there. Or we're being sloppy, one of the two. So our jaws are at about 1/8 of an inch, something like that. It's going to give us a perfect circle. So I'll set my calipers, just a little bit proud of that perfect circle. And that's going to be our tenon size, I think. Although if we did the math, that might actually still be a little bit small. So 8.5 divided by 3 be like 2 3/4. So we might change our mind on that. Because this, I mean, this bowl is pretty much a decorative kind of a bowl to start with. So that would actually be the bigger jaws. Now, just get things trued up to start with, and then we'll see what we're gonna, where we're gonna go from there. Can't have a total plan for everything. So if we spin it nice and slow, we're going to get an idea of where, because I really don't have a very good, necessarily a good center point down here. Not that it really matters. This thing is still about 1 inch thick. So that's enough. That should be more than enough material to do what I want to do with it. The only thing I could have checked was make sure the bottom is just as thick, but we'll just go for it. It's only a piece of wood. We mess it up, but well, hopefully we won't do that. So everything's nice and tight, secure, even though I was already standing in front of it. This, we should be able to bring the speed up fairly quickly. Maybe not. It's still, this will probably be out of balance from start to finish, just by virtue of what it looks like on the top. So let's see if I left enough room. There's probably more the room for the bigger one. And just set it for the bigger one and be done with it and see where that lands. Gonna land just a little bit bigger than that. I think that's probably a better size foot for this. So we'll make it just a little bit bigger. And it's not going to be very deep, because it doesn't really need to be. So we'll get our dovetail on there. And it really should have. Richard Raffin says you don't really need a flat down there, but I've always put a little bit of a flat down there just by virtue of, I think it makes it a little easier. So we're already round up into that area. Not very cleanly cut, but it's round. So that's a good thing. I'd rather take more off of the inside of this than the outside. But we got to make our shape, so. And make sure that we're getting, yep, we got rid of 90% of it. Be able to do a little bit more, maybe with the scraper down in there, or leaving a little bit of shear scraping down here. There was just a tiny bit of, not really worried about the little ripples, but I don't want any grain that has been pulled out or any of that good stuff. It's basically next to impossible to sand out, or at least very difficult to sand out anyhow, put it that way. So that should take care of that. Yep. And remember, when we move things, we don't do it while the machine is running. Especially on something like that. These little, I'm not sure I'm wild about leaving the little spikes on this kind of stuff, but people seem to like that. But it's also kind of hazardous because some of these little spikes are actually very, very sharp. A little hard to tell whether it's round or not because there's a big hole right here. But it does appear that we're round. I might have to work a little bit, a little bit on our curve right in through there. It's also picking up the grain a bit there. Kind of odd that it would do that. It's a 40-degree gouge, and that normally will cut very, very clean. But this is a burl, so some of the burl wood is not overly friendly to work with. Kind of makes it difficult up here too because there's some really high points. And make sure I get the whole way up. So, let's see what our scraper will do to it. I was never really much of a fan of the scrapers. When you start watching other people that have been doing things for like 30 years, mainly Richard Raffin, he just loves the regular traditional scrapers. So I have sort of adopted a little bit more of it than what I would have normally done. But that's also why that scraper, if you're watching the part where I sharpened it, or put a burr on it rather, I made sure that this edge of the scraper is curved that way, because it is 1 inch wide. So I can't get that engaged all at one time. Just picking some of the grain up a little bit, but I think we'll be all right on that end of it, because I think this stuff is actually fairly soft, which is probably why it wants to pick it up a little bit. I was more interested in getting the shape right. The other thing you can do with it is put it up on its side, up on its edge, and it gives it a shear scraping, shear cutting, which does a really nice job. That made it nice and clean and smooth. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get away with it up here where it's way out of kilter, unless we can get a little bit more speed out of it. A little bit, not much. A very gentle touch. I'm not going to try to go up on the upper part. I'll just sand that. It'll be safer, because I could feel it was starting to actually get to be where it was going to be aggressive. In other words, it was going to get grabby, and I don't want to get it grabby up there. If I have to sand a little bit harder up there, then that's going to be the case. Because it's only spinning a little over 800 RPMs. So that, I mean, you got one giant size point that's sticking way up, which will be the problem child. So I think that'll work. It does have some really nice figure to it. We'll see. It is dry, so this will be a finished project when we're done today. I got to get rid of this tenant, the original tenant, and then we'll probably up and sand this outside while we're here. There's no point in bouncing back and forth. And I could probably might as well do that before I get rid of that tenant. So we'll have to get the noisemaker on. We should be able to sand with 3-inch disc on the outside, at least. First order of business, go along the edge. Making sure I don't have any little, it leaves like little ramps up there. Now we'll go in reverse. I'll make sure we get rid of all of our tool marks. Any little bumps that was in there. That's why I went back after it, because I could feel there's a tiny little bit of a bump there. Can't see it, but you can feel it. I may actually have to go back and cut some more on that, because it wasn't a real smooth transition right there. Trying to see whether you can actually see it. I'd be really gentle where the should be gentle all the time, but wherever it's not necessarily a round piece. So I'll just go through the grits. And I do sand in reverse. The reason I sand in reverse is so that I can does better on the dust collection for me. It's actually in some ways easier to see what you're doing, I think. Any problem with the Velcro, just any dirt sticks to the Velcro. That should be it. That's the whole way up through 800, so normally what I would do with it. Although we might have to go back and hit some. Should have stopped earlier. That'll be good enough for now, but we're probably going to go back because I'll have to shave this foot eventually. I probably will go back and sand some more. There's a little bit of disturbed grain right there. And right here, you can see a white, sort of a white line right there. And I'm probably due for all new sandpaper as well. One of these days I should invest in remote control for the dust collector too, make life a little easier. Oh, wait a minute, don't loosen that. I gotta get rid of this tenant. The other tenant. Hopefully we didn't mess it up. No, we didn't. Yeah. Oh, this couple of weeks ago I had to buy a new dust collector. The one I had before, I actually put a remote control on it, but it was actually more of a household remote control. I'm not too sure that isn't what caused the motor to go bad. But the new one is actually a jet, and they do make one for it. I just haven't got around to purchasing such a thing. So if we take and make a tenant, I make a cone down there basically. Looks like it's just about small enough. That'll go down through the hole in the chuck without any problem. And it'll also give me a centering point because it's sort of a Morse taper, or it is a Morse taper in the tailstock, or the live center, I should say, not the tailstock, the live center. Get rid of that. I can just cut it off. Once again, I see a lot of people that are willing to take and try and part things off like this, but it's just not in your best interest, because you've already spent the time to make things right. Now you're going to screw it up by, not taking the 2 minutes out to take it off, saw it off rather than break it off or cut it off. But it will have some pretty figure. We just have to get some. We'll probably start right back over at 120 grit. I'll get all fresh paper though, because that's part of the problem, I think. course, it won't come to life until we put a little bit of finish on it, but get our tailstock completely out of the road. This is burl, so it really doesn't have much of a grain direction. Why am I going to get the idea that I made that too small? I did. I guess we're going to use the other chuck. But I measured that. Didn't measure very accurately, obviously. So that means this will leave big marks, which is okay. I can cut them off when we get there. Just not really what I wanted it to do. So we change things. We're going to spin it. Make sure we're, even though on screen it probably really doesn't look round, but it is. It's just the fact that there's so much stuff that's kind of goofy. So in this routine, we're going to get the tool rest in there right up along the sides, because now I'm going to switch camera views here. And so we probably can go quickly to there. Now we should be able to sort of see what I see. Because this is where the challenge comes in, because there's going to be this point, a lot of air in between. So I will try and we're going to pick up a vibration there. I'm going to go up past the vibration. This is where the digital variable speed really comes into play, because I can do it that way. And I don't want to try and get the light in your road, but I'm going to move the light a little bit. Hopefully it doesn't wash things out too bad inside, because I need to be able to see, because we're definitely thicker in places than others. So I'll go inside, find my bevel. These nice little light cuts. And they'll be doing a lot of stopping and looking. And I should have. Wonders of having multiples of things. As you can see, there's a major difference on one side than the other. It's barely round over there, but it's taken 1/4 of an inch out on that side. Hold on. Dumb stuff. Okay. what I was looking at was I have some stuff on Marketplace. Be right back. I'm going to put a fresh edge on this. This is a newer bowl gouge. It's still the 40-degree gouge. But it's longer. And the concern here is, remember I said them cute little burl knobs are sticking out? Well, they would be a very nice meat grinder if I was to touch them. So this is going to get my fingers or hand much farther away from them, which is kind of important. I don't have time to be going into the emergency room this week, so. And as you can see, there's just a wee bit of difference between the two. So use them to the really small, but you just have to keep in mind that you can't use them in certain places. This thing, I'm going to leave it fairly thick. At least that's the plan, because it would kind of defeat the purpose of having the burl if I made it really thin. It's really taking a little bit big of a cut down there, I'm sure, because it was getting pretty noisy. That feels like it's pretty smooth. We're just barely to the round right there. But I don't really see any majorly messed up grain, which is a plus. So where is our tool rest and reference? I'd like to keep on going just like I am. That's why we got to check things 3 times, because it just hit right there. Actually, I just switched to a longer tool rest. I don't normally have to do it quite that way. As far as come up a little bit. I have these collars on here, but I've moved these collars around. I definitely want to be cutting at or above center. So now that gives us more room, but we also have a definite. Here's where you get into the trouble of hitting yourself. So what I'm going to do, there's the end of that spike. I think that's the highest one. Yeah. I'm going to put a little piece of tape right there, just on the tool rest. That's a visual mark for me to make sure that, because I'm going to be paying attention to what I'm doing cutting versus, more so versus where my hand is at. We may also have to go to the bigger diameter bowl gouge because the way I'm going about it is I'm getting too much overhang on the tool rest, so it's going to give me a lot more vibration on the tool. You can see where that place is at is only about 1/4 of an inch thick right there. The rest of it's probably more like 3/8 of an inch. It's going to give it some character. There's definitely no way to get it totally even, but I probably am starting to thin out down there a little bit more than I should have. But it's too flexible now, even though it's dry. It's giving me a lot of noise, so I know better than to try and come back up there and cut. That would not work at all. Now we're going to have to move things around again. And we'll get rid of our 40-degree gouge and go to the 60-degree. The 40-degree gouge does not like to go around the corner, and that's where we're at right now. We're starting around the corner. And as you can see, I'm only going a little bit at a time so that I don't have to come back after things. Here's where we got to be very, very careful. You know what? This should just take the 2 minutes out and put the 5/8 inch gouge on there, because at that point right there, I probably have, in order to be on the bevel, I'm at probably 3 inches or more of unsupported tool. So it's going to have chatter. And I don't want it to have chatter. Not really worried about breaking a tool, but the chatter part will leave marks behind. So once again, the couple seconds out. I won't bore you with watching sharpen the same tools umpteen times. This is just a 5/8 inch bar bowl gouge. It is a Thompson as well. Which is pretty much all I use. Because I feel they're one of the best ones on the marketplace, as far as I'm concerned. They start to stay sharp longer. So in other words, they last longer, all that good stuff. And I will remove quite a bit of the heel on it. I'll show you. I think my grinding wheels, the sharpening them on a 350 grit wheel. So I've taken a lot of the heel away. That's going to allow me to get around this corner easier. And less chance when I go around that corner with it being smaller, then it won't leave the little compression lines that it would if I left the full bevel, because especially on a 5/8 tool, that bevel is probably close to a 1/2 inch long. Once again, our green tape. I do. I have 2 of them, I think. Yeah, 2. I have a small one and a little bit bigger one. problem with scrapers is they're rather expensive. And I really wanted to try the Richard Raffin routine. You probably could use a scraper right there. So that's the problem of one of the problems of having so much tool overhang, is that it's very difficult to get where I want to be. But this would be a Thompson scraper. This is a 1-inch one. It is very hard, but you don't need a giant size. A lot of people, we do need to be on center, so that's where we're at. I was always taught, if you watch some of the professional demonstrators that use a negative rake scraper, or most of them use a negative rake because they say you can't do the things that you can do with a traditional scraper. Well, if you watch Richard Raffin enough, he's doing a lot of the things that I was been taught, I guess you would say, at demonstrations that you can't do with a traditional scraper. They also say that, well, you know, it's got to have a nice big burr. The burr only lasts a little bit. Well, even though this burr is gone, it lasts longer than, this one will last longer than the silver one that I was using a little bit ago. But a lot of it depends on the wood too. This may or may not scrape nicely. It did on the outside, so we'll see on here. Once again, it's very, very light touch. We're not trying to remove a bunch of material. We are just trying to clean up some tool marks. And there's not really a whole lot of there's not a big hairy burr left on that. So it's going to give really, really fine little shavings. Probably, to me, the more of the key on using any of the scrapers is to be gentle. You're not trying to remove big amounts of material. Although if you watch Richard, he does some stuff on the inside of a bowl that he's removing a bunch of material, but that's him. That's the way he likes to do it, so. But the burr does last longer on the Thompson one than what it would on the silver one. But in order, that was something else that he had shown, in order to remove or rejuvenate, I guess you would say, that burr, I can take it in my hand and use this is actually a CBN, but you can use a diamond one as well. If you match that angle and we just go around there, we can actually create another little burr without going back to the grinder. It's a very fine burr, which is another huge topic of discussion in some of the wood turning people that use scrapers, that some people want to put a burr on a scraper that's using a 46 or 60 grit wheel or something like that because it puts a big hairy burr on it. Other people say they want to do it on a very fine wheel because it puts a very fine burr. Another one of them topics of conversation of who's right and who's wrong. And of course the simple answer is it's whatever works best for you. It's a refining tool. If the wood is hard enough, you can't use that on something soft. It is standing some of the grain up. It's pulling a little bit of grain out right there. So, you know, is that worth the difference of sanding those little ridges out versus using the scraper and taking a couple minutes out? Because right there it's actually picking the grain up to where that's going to be a lot of sanding. So I don't know. It's kind of a toss-up. I have been playing more and more with it, just because I rather enjoy watching his videos, and to me it's learning. I try and watch how he's doing things versus, a lot of times when my dad watches stuff like that, it's like, well, did you see them big chips he was making? I'm like, I don't care how big the chips are. I said, I want to see the finished piece. And that stuff right there is very, very hard. Like I say, it is burl. It's sort of cutting it. It's pretty much cutting it cleanly, but it's not. The bowl gouge is really not liking it too well, because burl has grain going every which way but loose, so you definitely can't get aggressive with it. So I got it, and really I got it to the round, so now we can pretty much just keep work on getting it more so refined. I could probably sharpen and use my big bottom bowl gouge right here too. It might do me some very big justice. I will sharpen it. This is a tool that does not get sharpened very often. For one, it really doesn't get used very hard. But when I need it, in this case, matter of fact, you can't even, my screen this handle's about 26, 28 inches long. Also is filled with lead, so it's very heavy. The tool is a 3/4 inch bar tool, so it's heavy as well. And it really only has one real purpose in life, and that is to do the very bottom of a bowl. So it will last me a lot of years as far as that goes. And it will allow me to hang over the tool rest. At this point, I could actually take the tool rest and bring the tool rest back parallel to the front, and this will hang over the tool rest with very minimal vibration at about 4 or 5 or 6 inches away. I do need to be cutting on center. It might have been why I was getting a little vibration out of that one earlier. It was just a hair above where I should have been. Which really doesn't matter. Above is okay. Below is when you have problems. Yeah. This is sort of it's a very different tool to use, because you're going to use it with the flute pretty much straight up. And if we leave the little nub in the bottom, that's fine. That's easy to sand off. It's better than leaving a divot in the bottom. But as you can see, hopefully, I could probably try and zoom in. That tool will give you almost a perfectly clean surface going across the center of a bowl, which is what it's designed to do. I just need to come back up a little bit further. I left a pretty big hump right here. So we'll make another little one or so little nice fine cuts. Like I say, I'm cutting. That's the hard part about this. Everything else you're using at about a 45 degree. This is pretty much 90 degrees, straight up and down for the most part. And I'm cutting in the center to the left-hand wing. This corner has been ground back a little bit on this left-hand wing so that if I turn it too far, this little point doesn't dig in. But like I say, this tool probably takes more practice than anything else that I have, I think. Once again, could we do that? Could we have gotten rid of that with the scraper? Absolutely. But that's probably one of the harder places to sand down in there. I still don't have a very good curve right there. So the question is going to be, do I go after the curve that I want with that gouge? Or do we pick up a scraper? Multi-million-dollar question. Right now, I probably can use my half-inch gouge right there and get away with it. I have better control with the smaller gouges. It's just kind of how I am. I have enough thickness to be able to go after it and keep playing with it a little bit. So I think we're going to. This one should be sharp. We're going to make a very nice little small kind of a cut. Once again, we have a lot of tool hanging over, so I can't make a deep cut or thicker cut. It's going to cut just pretty much just as clean as what the bottom bowl gouge did. So I successfully moved the hump further down. Is really all I did, but I'm getting there. Let's start behind where the hump is at. Go through the hump. Basically come out the other side. I'm not worried about that last little bit in the middle at this point. So it feels like we did a pretty good job now. And as you can see, maybe, I just have a little bit too much light for these cameras in some ways. But it's nice and cleanly cut, which is what I'm after. Cleanly cut means less sanding. And now, can we go back with our big one and pick that up and go across there? And that should be it. If not, then we can go back. We could actually, I do have a very big, fat, thick scraper as well, if I wanted to use that. Don't think there's hardly any burr left on that, so we'll just take the cheater routine and we'll make a burr on it. This is a negative rake one. I've only ground on the top of this one time because I think as I use it, which like I say, I don't use it very often or very much, so it keeps the burr fairly long. But I think on this one here, I'm going to have a go at the part of making it a non-negative rake and try it and see whether I can get it, see whether I can get the understanding to use it properly without destroying some things. But as you can see, this nice little light fluffy shavings come off. So I mean, it should have cut it cleanly, and it did, because there is a bunch of burl right there. I should probably go back after a little bit more and come back up just a little bit further on it. Right now I have a pretty good curve. There's kind of a little bit of a hump left in there, which would be right there. So just mark it with the tool. It's really all about the less amount of sanding you do. So I think we're good. We left just a tiny little nub on the center point, which is fine. Better off to leave that than to break through it and cut a tear out some of the grain right in the center, which is very, very easy to do. So now we're back to sanding again. If you think the sanding part's boring, I've been working on making pepper mills. Well, all you get done doing with pepper mills is drilling holes and sanding the part that you drill, because the Forstner bits do not cut cleanly in the center. So, which size? I don't think my 3-inch disc will go in here. No, I don't think so. I might be able to use probably going to get new sandpaper for all of them. I've gotten too much of it sitting around out here. So it's just like, might as well start over and be done with it. My decision is that right now on the smaller drill, I have just strictly a straight up and down 2-inch disc on there, where I think I could use maybe the 3s there. Try the 3s first. Maybe a 120, 150. 180, 220, 320, 400. In that bag, they are need 600 and 800. Place that I buy my sandpaper from, this is some of the Rhino red. It comes from, I forget where it's from now. Good sand. It's very good sandpaper. Lots of good sandpaper out there, but this is the one that I've used on my doing flat work for quite a few years, and now they're making them in. Actually, they're making them in 2 and 3 inch discs. So that's kind of a plus because they last a lot longer than everybody else's. I don't necessarily mind paying a little bit more money for that sandpaper. So just sort of what we did on the outside. I'm going to go around and I'm going to sand that edge without it spinning. Because it'll want to go out over the edges. And don't want to mess up the little nub. See, it's sort of fighting with me a little bit because the curve is not quite, it's not a 3-inch curve. So that's kind of what I figured it was going to do to me. But we'll have to go to the 2-inch or 2 3/8, because I do have both. We might use the 2 3/8 one. Because we may actually end up sanding that entire thing. Good possibility without it spinning. We'll have to see. I'd rather not, but chances are good that it's going to be that way. Because there's just not enough room. I don't think there's enough room. I might be able to. But here's where the perfectly is going to come in, is when I get down here to the very bottom. Right there, it touched my finger. So we'd have blood flying at that rate. And we can't have that because this old man don't like the sight of blood, at least the sight of his own blood. So if that happened, we'd be passed out on the floor, especially if it would bleed a lot. Oh. So once again, 120, 150, 180, 240, 320, 400, 600, 800. I never used to go quite that fine either. That's kind of something I've been doing here lately. It does make the finishing part of it easier. And now, wanted a soft pad. I probably didn't need to get sandpaper out either. Now that I went back to this, oh well. But these are kind of a tapered pad. They're soft, reasonably soft. Going to allow me to get into the contours a little bit better. And sort of as long as we keep this moving quite well, and we're going, like I say, I'm not putting much pressure on, so it's going to contour to the shape that I have in the bowl. I could put an extension on it, but the extension I have is like 6 inches long. And I've tried it doing it that way before, but it just doesn't. I don't know, I need to stop at the home center one of these days and see if I can find one that's only like 3 inches long. Might do better. I stand at very center point. As I said, we left that little tip sticking up there. I'm going to make sure I get rid of it with the coarser grid. And now we're inspecting, looking for any place, like right there, is some picked up grain. So I want to get rid of any and all the places that are not very nice. With this grid. I appear to be the only little bit around that little burrow eye right there, and it has a little bit picked up around it. This is also how I would do every once in a while, I will do a natural edge bowl, and I will do it from green to finished thickness in the one go. This is how I would sand them once they've dried and warped and did all that stuff, and I don't go back and return them. This would be the same process for sanding them. I'm not sure it's necessarily an easier way to do it, but you just have one of them. Every once in a while, I have one of them days and say, I don't want to just rough turn something. I want to, go full on to finish. But then it becomes an issue on sanding. Also, not running the sander at full speed either. You don't want to generate heat. Cross the center a little bit. If I let go of it, it would actually start to spin it, just by virtue of what the drill is trying to do, is trying to drive it. That was 150. I don't make a big jump between, I do 150 and 180. I'm not sure that that's totally necessary. You go right from 150 to 220, 240, whichever you may have. Also, a little chunk fell out. A little bark inclusion right there. The piece just fell out. It's okay. Just gives it a little more character. You just have to be a little bit more vigilant when I go to finish that. That probably is going to come right through to the other side, which it does. on to 240. The very, very top edge is the hardest part. You try and get out over there by about a third, something like that. The rest, we're just going to keep the bowl moving. Doing stuff like this is a lot more time consuming than doing something that would be a non-natural edge, especially a natural edge like this. Also why I took a lot more time on the inside to make things right the first go around. If we'd have left some of them humps in there, they would not be able, you would not be able to sand them out in this fashion. Say, I'm liable to have a bloody finger to even doing it this way. Like I say, some of these, I don't know, kind of like a bowl. It's going to be a bowl with a bite, because these little spikes that are sticking out are very sharp. I'm quite sure. Well, most people leave them alone, but it's almost like I want to take them and just touch them a little bit with sandpaper or something, just to knock that super sharp edge off. This will definitely not be sitting down on the table with the craft show. It will be up on the shelf so that some little kid doesn't come along and grab a hold of it. So our last grit, and then we'll flip this around, figure out what I'm going to do with the foot. Whether I leave it. It's always nice if the foot is a little, would make it sit up off the table, but also might make one like this a whole lot more work. You see how much I have left in the bottom. and then we'll make that decision. Now we get to look for any big scratches like right there. And that's a sanding scratch because of that dumb thing that fell out. You go after it by hand. Might be easier than anything else. Got the majority of it. I think that's going to be good, the inside. I think if you use these pads like this, especially the softer ones, stick your fingernail in between them so you can get a hold of the pad and pull the pad down and pull the Velcro off. These dumb little things are expensive. I think those right there were like $6 or $7. So try not to rip them in half. So inside ready for finish. So we'll go back and do the outside. Basically, we'll do the outside just like what we did when we started. Any difference now is the inside is finished. I'm going to put a couple paper towels in there just as a little extra padding. And that way we won't mess anything up. And if we did this right, looks like it could have been a little bit smaller. I got to get it in the middle. Here we go. Get it in the middle of it. That should actually be very well centered. And it is. Has a little bit of a wobble to it maybe, but not much. You wanted to shoot. Forgot one important step. And we'll go back overhead. I want to check the thickness of the bottom. And we're only about a ½ inch with that tenon on. So that tenon's going to stay. It's going to become the foot. Otherwise, I'd be in trouble. So now, even though we're doing bowl work, we're going to switch back over and we're going to use our spindle gouge to actually finish this bottom off. So we're going to get rid of our dovetail. So we make that flat. And I'm going to come back from the top and we'll cut down in there. Make that curve go right down into the foot. I want to get down in there at 90 degrees, and we can make a little bead just using the spindle gouge, basically the wing of the spindle gouge, to make a bead. It's really kind of very simple to do. Our spindle gouge will be a negative rake or shear scraper as well, same as a bowl gouge. But that's also another place that it's kind of a little difficult to get in there and sand. You need to go a little bit deeper into that corner. That should be good. We're going to need to scrape a little bit or do something a little bit with it because it's not, even though it's a burl you should be able to, usually you can go in either direction. For whatever reason, it's not allowing me to do that. If we just use the wing, and I'm cutting down here on the bottom of the wing, the tool is down at a pretty steep angle, so it's slicing the wood. You just need to get into that groove a little bit better. And that should be good. We'll undercut this foot a little bit. Not necessarily totally worried about that at this point, because we still have to remove that little nub on the bottom anyhow. I don't take that away until I'm totally finished with everything. I think that'll work. This all is going to get sanded pretty much by hand. And then we're going to go back and we're going to resand that up there. That does not suit. So we're sanding by hand sandpaper. We're going to slow things way down about 500 RPM. It could even go a little bit lower than that. It's probably going to make my fingers hot quickly. I started with 180 down in there. Most interested in getting down into that crack, the little crack down in there, and just a little ways up, because then from there I can power sand it. I can run the cut edge of the paper into that crack and roll it around the corner. Make this bead a nice round bead. And like with everything else, we're going to go right straight through. Just look and make sure. Just like when I started with 120 on everything else, I'm going to make sure that I have all the, anything that would be a problem later before we moved on to the next grid. We will go right up through. Looks like I need a new piece of 400. Pretty much just like everything else, we're going to go right up through 800. And we clean off the dirt each time. More concerned that I left some grit behind, some sand and grit. And I got to go a little ways out from there. That's the rest of it we're going to do with power. And we'll be able to get down in there pretty close. May not be able to can't get down into that groove, so we certainly can't sand that little bead with power of any kind. So that's our 800. Ready for finish. You see there's a little disturbed grain. I'm going to leave that alone because it is on the bottom. I should have, I don't know why I didn't see that earlier. We had some places, right? Yeah, there's some right there. So we'll go back. We'll just go back and resand this whole thing. We're going to sand this part first. Get rid of that. In some ways, I could just spot sand too. This is probably what I will do with the 120 grit paper, is just spot sand, and then we'll start with 150 or 180 and we'll sand the whole thing. Just making sure that I have nothing. All these little burrow eyes have a tendency to have some torn grain or picked up grain, however we want to call it. It's a very pretty piece of burl, so if you're going to ask a pretty good amount of money for it, to me it should be done to the best of your ability. So we'll just go back and quickly resand everything. And as I get finer and finer, I will get closer and closer to that little bead at the bottom. Because we know we already have that sanded through 800, so there's no point in me going down there close to that until I get up into the 5 or 6 to 800 grit sandpaper. I think it's going to be a very interesting looking piece once we put a little clear finish on there. We'll get to that here very directly. Two more grits to go. That was 600. Go to 800. As you saw at 600, I went down into that groove. And I'll do the same thing with the 800. It should leave us a nice surface. Put our finish on and be good, I think. A lot of these spikes are really, really sharp. And the other thing we can do is take our piece of 800 grit sandpaper, which is not that one. There's our 800. And we can sand this by hand a little bit, do little random orbit circles, just to make sure that we don't have any scratches that would be concentric. It's also going to open up the pores of the wood a little bit. Power sanding really sort of closes things up. This will open it up a little bit. Going to allow my finish to go in there a little easier, a little nicer. Turn our dust collection on. Get rid of some noise. And now we're ready for some finish. A paper towel and wipe this off. Get rid of the hose. Wipe the dust off. Paper towel does wonders on wiping dust off. It's almost like a little miniature tack claw. Especially the regular. This is one of them shop ones. It'll do okay. I'll go back over it again with a regular one before we put their finish on. Gonna need a piece of wax paper. We're gonna back this up. We're gonna put our piece of wax paper in the bottom, then our paper towel. Because what we're gonna finish with is Parfix 3408, which is a slow setting CA glue, very thin, slow setting CA glue that will soak down into the wood quite quickly. I might have to go over in the other room. I don't have any pieces of felt. All right. So bear with me a moment. I have to go over in another room to get a piece of felt. I'm going to wipe off more dirt. Not really worried about the burly part. May or may not actually put any finish on that part. If I do, that will probably be the very last thing that I do with it. I'll be right back. So what I'm going to use is a piece of polyester felt, just a little piece. I'll show you here in a minute. I just have to cut it. Cut little, like 3/4 inch squares or something like that out of it. Use that and that. Gloves. Just because it slits slowly, it's still a CA glue. It will still stick your fingers. Glue your fingers fast to everything and anything. So we can't have that. So we'll wear gloves. And then we'll take our piece of polyester felt, put it in our paper towel, and we'll roll it up into a nice little applicator pad. Gives it a little reservoir. It just, to me, it makes it easier. A lot of people will just put it on with a paper towel. This is a 3408, even though I use this I fill this bottle out of an 8-ounce bottle. So that's thumbprints of getting glue on there and sticking it fast. So no odor, slow setting. has a 40-second time delay. Going to rub it in, generous amount. I want it to saturate the wood. We'll deal with that little V groove down there a little bit later. There's a really easy way to do that. Right now we're just going to get plenty on. It's going to soak in. And then we'll wipe off the excess. And then tomorrow we can finish up the tenant, give it a buff, and it'll be ready to put on the shelf for the first craft show of the year, which will be next Saturday for us, for me, us I should say, me and my wife, both. So we'll keep going back around. We're going to keep putting a little bit more on. Like I say, I want it saturated. Because all I want is what's going to sink into the grain, soak into the grain. So as I spin it around, there's still some dry areas. So I just keep going over those areas. This little bead is about the easiest thing. Take one little drop in there, spin it around. That's taken care of. One more little trip around. Doesn't look like I really have any real dry spots. It's like I say, I have 40 seconds to get this done. As long as this maintains a nice wet surface, it really doesn't, it'll give you a little bit more than 40 seconds. And it also depends on your climate. I'm in Pennsylvania, I do have humidity. And that is what causes super glue to set up, is moisture. So now we're going to take our dry paper towel and we're going to wipe off the excess. Doing the same thing as what I did when I applied it. Is I'm going in a nice circular motion, spreading around getting the excess off. I'm going to keep doing that till it's totally dry. At least it looks totally dry anyhow. Because I don't want any of it that's sitting on the surface. I only want what's soaked down in the surface. This is a one coat application. Cannot go back over it a second time. It will not, if it can't soak in, it doesn't know what to do. It will literally sit on the surface and set up, and you'll have nice little raindrops all over your surface. Of course, I guess if that's what you wanted, then you could do it that way, but I want this to be smooth, silky smooth, and relatively shiny. We're looking for any of the little pesky spots like up around these burrow eyes that still has some sitting there. You're going to spin it nice and slow and make sure. Because as soon as I hit it with the activator, then I'm done. Then it's done, rather. I think I got it dry. Looks like it. As you can see how sharp they are, they literally tears little pieces off of that paper towel. I'm going to use an activator. It's their brand of activator, the heptane based. So that means it as well has no odor. So I'll spin it nice and slow, just easier. About 18 to 24 inches away. Go from the base to the top, one shot, that's enough. All you got to do is start the chain reaction, and it will take care of it from there. So that's our outside done. Now that we made the tenant the wrong size. I normally make this tenant to match the jaws. And this time we're actually in between them. Because if I clamp down on this with that set of jaws, it's going to leave point marks in it. So let's see what else we can. I could just finish it sitting upright too, which is another option. It might be the option we have to go with. Because it's not a good option to do. We'll get away with it. I'm not going to spin it. I'm not turning anything, so I can get away with just barely grabbing a hold of that. So I'm really not clamping down on it. So we got to get the excess remainder of the dust off the inside. I use a plain white paper towel to get rid of more yet. Although that shop towel actually looks like it did a pretty good job. So basically we're going to rinse and repeat. We're going to do the same thing on the inside as we did the outside. So we'll take our paper towel. Guess it would make sense if I actually changed over to the inside view. So let's go back inside. It looks like I bumped my camera. That'll work. Same deal. Make the pad, get her plenty wet. The inside is going to take less than the outside did because the pores of the wood are now clogged up from the outside. Granted, this is a burl. It probably really didn't soak in like it would if it was like a normal kind of a wood. That's also why there was a piece of wax paper on the inside. Because if it finds a place in the grain is nicely lined up and all that good stuff, it can go right straight through to the inside. And unfortunately, I've had that happen already. And then it sticks fast to the little blue pad that's on there. Really hate to put a drop in there because that's going to come out the other side. I'll do it anyhow. Like I say, same process. We're just going to work it in. Let it soak in. Keep my bottle cleaned off. This little 2-ounce bottle is actually quite old. Probably at least a year old or better. Because I'm kind of vigilant on wiping it off. So that it's not so messy. Same as the outside. Go after it with a dry paper towel. Inside may also set up a little bit quicker because there was some could have been some activator that got sucked around the corner and shoved onto the inside, which it did. I can see right there's a place that's already setting up and it shouldn't be. So that's generally what happened. I'm going to wipe that as hard as I can and as best as I can to get what's starting to set up off there right there. After that, I'm going to leave it alone because it's much easier to actually just go back after with a little bit of 800 grit sandpaper or even a little straight razor blade as like a cabinet scraper and scrape them little bumps that's gonna be there because it's setting up. Easier to take them off that way than to keep trying screwing around and chasing them otherwise. We use one more paper towel and make sure. This is just kind of like sanding. You do a good job on the first go around and then it becomes very easy to take care of the rest. Because if I'm going to have something that's a place that didn't get wiped off, it's going to be in the very bottom. At least that's generally the rule for me. There's a place that already started to set up. The paper towel actually stuck to it. But my little straight razor will wipe that right off. I could probably even do up along here while it's still soft. It might actually do better. Because there was quite a few places along this edge when I sprayed the activator. Since it was spinning, we had a little bit of air movement to draw that on the inside. But once it's dry, that's what I'll do with it. It's just a straight razor blade. If you've ever done any woodworking and used a cabinet scraper, it's basically the same thing. It's just a sharp edge, straight up and down. You can do that with you spray finishes, stuff like that. It'll do the same thing. It'll work in the same fashion. So we'll just give it another shot of activator on the inside, or two. One across, one back. At a distance, not up close and personal. Like 18 to 24 inches away. And I did not clamp down too hard, so it didn't leave any marks, which is a plus. So now we can go back overhead and I'll show you the whole thing, which it will sit till at least tomorrow. And we can, now that things are stationary, I can bring it in up close and personal. And you can see the character to it. Got quite a bit of character in there. Kind of a pretty piece. The 3408 does have a 24-hour cure time, which means come tomorrow at this time, it'll be ready to buff it and do whatever else I need to do to it. And it's going to be as hard as it's ever going to get. We can flip it over and show you what the bottom looks like. Bottom, I'll have a little work to do down there. It looks like I missed some wiping off, but it won't take long to finish it up. And then tomorrow I will be able to use this same little Morse taper down here, put it onto the vacuum chuck, And I'll be able to clean up this bottom as well, all being held with vacuum, and then I can sand it and finish the bar, sign it and all that good stuff, and put a little finish on the bottom, and it'll be done. Ready to go on the old trusty auction block. So that's a piece of elm burl. At least that's what I had it marked as. So, but right now I think it's time to go get some lunch. So we'll see if I know anybody that's on at this hour. Never on at this hour. Nope. There's nobody on that I follow, so I guess we're just gonna call it a day, and unless anybody has any questions or comments. That's what we're gonna leave it at. Go get some lunch. Yeah. Well, y'all have a good rest of your day. I may be back another day this week. I don't know. Probably will, but I got a fair amount of things to do. I'm working on a bunch of pepper mills, so they're really kind of, as far as I'm concerned, they're very much boring to watch. But I may come back on and show you what that's it. Oh, to raid into. See, I'm not smart enough to raid into somebody that. Let me think. How did I do that the last time? Yeah. I just call it a day. Like I said, I know there's a way that I can just type it in and do it, but it's been a very long time since I tried that. So I think we'll just call it even and call it a day. So thanks for coming and hanging out, and we'll catch you all another day.